65 years ago, the Supreme Court passed a law to prevent segregation from occurring in schools in the United States. And 65 years later, according to Chang in 2018 through Vox, the level of segregated schools in the South is equal to what it was at the time of that decision. Segregation is not just an issue of race. It is an issue of economic status and social success, and there's something that we can do to help solve it. School boards should be required by their state governments to draw district lines in ways that promote racial and economic diversity in schools. Considering that most of us will be parents to the next generation, we should be taking action on this issue. South Carolina is one of the homes of segregation, and as college students here, we have the potential to make a difference. Throughout the past month, I've examined abundant research on diversity in schools, and I've selected the most compelling and relevant pieces of evidence to share with you. Today, we will take a look at what has caused this lack of diversity in schools, the resulting negative effects, and a potential solution to change those effects. Let's take a look at how this all started. Our lack of diversity in schools can be traced to both historical events and to our use of zoning. First, impoverished people of color were isolated in their states through force of policy. According to Carr and Anaker in 2015 through the Banking and Financial Services Policy Report, the Federal Housing Administration was established in 1934, and for the next few decades, only non-Hispanic white families would be able to take out loans for homes. So as white families moved out of the cities into the new suburbs, they were taking their jobs with them, trapping minority families living in the inner cities in a financial drought. And this was enough time for permanent residential segregation to occur, which is affecting school diversity today because of something called zoning. Now, as we all know, the schools that we attend as children are largely decided based off of where we are zoned to go, which is decided based off of where we live. And according to Chang in 2018 through Vox, zoning is done at the local level by the school board. And most districts gerrymander these lines in order to perpetuate and even increase the underlying residential segregation. So members of the school board, typically white affluent individuals, have the power to keep white students from middle to higher income areas together and separate in the schools that they attend from minority students coming from lower income areas. So black students usually end up going to school with black students, and white students usually end up going to school with white students. But why does this really matter? Well, as it turns out, the demographics of students who go to a school have profound effects on its functioning, specifically on the funding that the school gets and on both the academic and social success of the students who go to that school. First, let's talk about money. Schools are funded through federal, state, and local property taxes. Now, federal and state taxes are usually distributed fairly evenly across a district, but it is when you look at the property taxes that differences start to appear. So a school that pulls students from lower income areas will inherently receive much less funding than a school that pulls students from higher income areas. But is there really a significant difference in the types of students who are coming from these areas? Well, according to Klain in 2010 through Sage Journals, of all the highly concentrated white schools, only 15% of them had more than half of their students on free or reduced lunch, compared to the 88% of highly minority schools with these same numbers. So yes, white students are much more likely to be coming from higher income areas and financially stable situations, in contrast to minority students. And this explains our unfair use of zoning today. And minority students, unfortunately, because of their situations, usually need extra academic assistance. But because of the unequal distribution of property taxes, their schools typically cannot provide them with the better teachers and resources that they need to succeed academically. So this lack of diversity also creates a lack of academic and social success among students. And in this sense, white students have just as much to gain from an increase in diversity as minority students. According to Rashid et al. In 2019 with the SRCD, students in diverse environments are more prone to improvement in the areas of cognition, critical thinking, and problem solving, leading to both short-term and long-term academic success. In addition, according to Wells et al. In 2016 through TCF, in these integrated schools, students will have shared experiences, viewpoints, and approaches with their diverse peers. Experiences that 96% of major employers seek out. So these are amazing opportunities, but no student, no matter their race, will be able to benefit from them if they are only going to school with children who look like themselves. So it's clear how this lack of diversity is negatively impacting both students and schools. But now let's take a look at what we can do to help. The main goal is to increase both racial and economic diversity in schools, but this cannot be done without both policy and personal solutions being put into place. Now, we already know that many districts are gerrymandering their lines in order to keep similar students together, but this gerrymandering can actually be used to achieve the opposite, and that's what this policy is proposing. With this policy, school boards will be mandated by their state governments to redraw their district lines in ways that set up schools to pull from different racial and economic areas within their districts. We have to be careful with this, though. According to Meckler in 2019 through the Washington Post, in 2007, the High Court invalidated the use of race as a criteria in assigning students to schools. So if I were a member of the school board, I could not specifically pick out a group of white students and place them into a predominantly Hispanic school. But what I can do is make generalizations about residential areas and draw my district lines in ways that set up schools to pull from those areas based off of their racial and economic patterns. Now I know what you might be thinking. What about cities where there just isn't diversity? Where there's an absurdly high concentration of high-income white families or low-income minority families? Unfortunately, this policy wouldn't apply to those areas. With this policy, we are taking advantage of the diversity that already exists within a district. So now, school districts will be routinely evaluated based on demographic data given by the U.S. Census Bureau. And if their levels of diversity reach a set standard, then this policy will be put into place in that district. So now, what can we do as individuals to help support the implementation of this policy? Well, with any change like this, there's going to be an undoubted amount of backlash. But right now, there's actually promise for that sort of resentment to be rapidly decreasing in the near future. According to Horowitz in 2019 at the Pew Research Center, 76% of American adults consider racial and ethnic diversity to be good for the country, the majority of which are 18 to 30-year-olds. That's us. We are the ones who are becoming more and more excited about these opportunities for diversity. So let's act like it. Let's support the decisions of our school boards and sacrifice those few extra minutes of sleep to drive our child to a school that may or may not be farther away. If my mom could do it on her own with 4 kids for 14 years, then I can do it, and you can too, along with the rest of your district. Yes, the new school might be very different from the one that our child would have originally been attending, but with this policy, schools across an entire district will be raised to an equal and higher level of quality. There have been many methods to increasing diversity in schools, but this is the only one that requires little to no extra funding, demands equal efforts from all sides, and will eventually create equal education opportunities across an entire district. With this policy, students of all racial and economic backgrounds will be placed in equal learning environments that better reflect the diversity in the real world. And with any kind of change like this, the world will not only become a more tolerant place, but it will become a place where a child's starting position in life has absolutely no say in how successful they might be. Hopefully today, you've taken in the importance of this issue that has thus far remained unsolved. Now we can see how historical segregation and unfair zoning is negatively impacting both students and schools in America. But now we have a solution to potentially change those effects. Once again, school boards should be required by their state governments to draw district lines in ways that promote both racial and economic diversity in schools. It has been 65 years since a plan was put into place to eliminate segregation in schools in America. And 65 years later, we see no evidence of that. As college students, we are about to be entering a stage in our lives where this issue could affect us in a whole new way. But right now, we are in the perfect position to raise awareness, take action, and support this policy. We have everything we need. We have strong motivation. We have compelling evidence, and most importantly, we have powerful voices. So for the sake of our students, let's use those voices, and let's not wait another 65 years to do it.